Welcome to the Consummate Athlete podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete podcast. Peter, how's it going?
It's going very well. We had a great weekend at the Substance Project's Eager Beaver, which is based sort of where I learned to mountain bike in Mansfield, Ontario. And we had, I think, over 10 athletes that we work with came to it and did some variation of enduro marathon and gravel. So there was 3 races over the 2 days, and we camped 2 nights, Friday, Saturday. And yeah, it was just a great weekend, really great time hanging out and low key, and then some hard racing.
Yeah, we got to run an aid station on Saturday, which was super cool. It's been a while since I've done something like that, and it was kind of that good reminder of for me especially, because I was still walking around on the boot this weekend, the whole if you can't race, and we get this question a lot, like what do I do when I'm injured and I can't race, or like, oh, I'm gonna miss being around my community and stuff. I always forget that volunteering is such a awesome option, and it just feels fantastic. It's a great way to see everybody and, get to help out and be part of the community, even when you can't necessarily race, or even when, it's just okay, I should probably take some time off, but I don't want to miss out on stuff. Okay, sure. Well, volunteer.
Which is, sort of related. Today we're going to talk about recovery, maybe a little bit of specifics around cyclocross, because it often is challenging, but also just in general, maybe as masters, adults, recovery. So that would be something, this volunteering to help your local weekly cyclocross race go, could be something that, rather, if that is your social, exposure for the week, but you want to really focus on the weekend races and you're having trouble recovering between. It might not even be every week, but that might be a strategy. So neat that you were able to do that whilst being down with your boot.
Yes, yeah, it's actually been a really, really rough 10 days, I'm not gonna lie, injury wise.
I think everyone's really concerned that you're way too positive.
I know. It's funny. I don't really know how else to be, because...
So, to be clear, she's not breaking down. There's been a couple incidents, but she is mostly very positive about the DNF at Leadville 100, which we detailed in detail.
Do you have clients that are emailing you, is Molly actually okay? Is that what's happening?
I think so. I mean, it's not like you're going to have a full breakdown. Well, there was tears on that podcast, but yeah, you're handling it well, but it's certainly not... would it have been better to finish? Probably.
Yeah, that would have been great.
And not have this cast on. But yeah, you're handling it pretty well, I would say. I was concerned it was going to be poor with the boot on and everything else.
No, I think we've talked about this. You're reading that book that talks about social proof and stuff. And in some ways, honestly, it sounds silly, but having the boot on is that reminder of no, I actually did get legitimately hurt doing this thing. And that this is where I'm at. So it wasn't my toe hurts. It was no, I can't walk on this leg right now. But that said, I do have the boot off at home, which is really nice, and definitely getting some more movement back in my ankle, which feels good. The swelling has come way down. So I think we are definitely out of the woods as far as any major concerns go. I think it is just, okay, it's a sprain. We're working on it. We're working through it. No, my big problem this week is I also had a minor oral surgery for something completely unrelated to it. So now I'm just head to toe a total mess. So if I sound a little funkier than usual, I know I normally have a lisp at the best of times. It looks like I got punched in the mouth. So that's where we're at.
So we're not doing video today for the YouTube fans. You can still watch the logo on YouTube, yeah. I suppose. But yeah, that's the idea. And so we're coming into this fall season. And I think, when we talk about recovery, there's always this, within a workout between intervals, which might be, that's even more, less than micro, but there's sort of that. Then there's on the day-to-day, the week. And then there's sort of on the month, you take your rest week. So that would be on the meso or middle side of things. And then there's also the macro, which might be on the season, or, if we have a peak, it might be within that peak. You're taking what we call transition weeks, rest weeks, off weeks, where we're not really training during those weeks. And for masters, especially, I find that this is tricky because they're often not pushing to the max limits of what they're doing. But there are these periods where there might be a dental surgery, kids going to university for the first time. This week alone, I know there's 5 clients this year that have kids going to either back to university, but I think 5 who are like first time universities. And I think that's not having done it, but having been on the other side of being the person going to university, that it's a pretty emotional time. Some of these people are empty nesting for the first time. So there's a whole relationship dynamic that's going to change there as far as you and your spouse. So it's like, you probably don't need to race if that doesn't seem obvious at this time in your life, right? Like in the same way that like the person going to university is going to have a big transition. These are transitions and maybe smaller on the life transition scale thing, but you just had like not larger dentals. It really wasn't. It was like under an hour. It wasn't a big deal, but like it's disruptive. You're not eating. So even in lieu of your boot, this ankle injury, it's going to be tough. You're going to have to give yourself a little while to get back up to speed, even just if all you had was a dental surgery.
Yeah, for sure. Which is, I'll be clear. I was not smart enough to like schedule it as like, oh, I'll be back from Leadville and I'll be tired, so this will be great. It was just the first appointment I could get in for the thing that I needed to get done. But it does work out very well because it is okay. I was already kind of in this like off couple weeks.
And planned,
we
right?
we have a family thing this weekend that's normally would be really stressful for me, like figuring out how to work in training while we're hanging out with our niece and our, extended family and stuff. But now I can be like, okay, cool. I can, splash around in the water with her, and they do have kayaks at this place. So I'm like, all right,
sure.
Kayak workout.
And I mean, this goes back, you just did a goal setting presentation for one of the NICA groups last week. And it is sort of this idea that we need to, as adults, I think especially, but I think this is relative. We do this with our teen and tween and young adult clients as well. But this idea of when we're goal setting, it ideally would be broader than just sport goals, where we're looking at, we like the 5x2, which is just simply saying like on the weekly, on the monthly, on the yearly, what are the targets? And those could be all the OWL words is what Dan John geniusly called these, the financial, the marital, the emotional, the spiritual, physical. You don't have to do all of these, but pick probably 2 or 3 where it's sort of like your work, your family, your training, right? Simple. Okay, so in work, I'm an accountant and I have to hustle from whenever. It seems like they're always hustling, but April is tax deadline, at least, whatever, skew it one way or whichever way you go with your taxes.
Assuming you're paying them.
Right,
Hopefully you're paying them.
So we often talk about probably Unbound just isn't the race for an accountant. I apologize if that's your race this year.
Or a teacher. Teacher's the other big one, right?
Yeah, you're coming into like exam time and you're still at school, right? For teachers, I would say like that like Labor Day weekend is probably like Shenandoah is this weekend, our provincial road championships this weekend, world championships, not that that's probably relevant for most teachers. I apologize. But for mountain bike is this weekend. There's like, just things that are better timed. Eager Beaver was this weekend. It would be a great time. I had several teachers were there and they were flying, right? Because they've been training almost full time, or as best they can, they don't have to go to work for the most part, for 2 months. So that's a great lead into the race, right? Not that they weren't training before. It's just there's a lot of other stuff. So that idea of thinking about your goals, and so for us, I guess where I was going with that is, spending time with family. We have a niece, and she's gonna soon not care to be around us.
She's not gonna think I'm the cool aunt anymore.
And then in the same, parents and stuff, right? So this is a great opportunity for us to go to a cottage, and indeed, like we could be trying to crush training, to try and get to like a fall marathon or something. But it's sort of thinking about like how do you want to spend this time. So. You are in charge of that. You choose how you do that. But again, when we're thinking about recovery and timing the year, that macro cycle, that's sort of the things that we're thinking about is, Leadville was before this. We tried to plan all this so that then we went away this weekend rather than say the August long weekend, which would have been right before Leadville.
Yeah. So, cross is coming. That's kind of the point of this episode a little bit. And I think you mentioned the macro and sort of the micro. So do you want to talk about like the break maybe between mountain bike and cyclocross season? Because
or
I
road.
think
let's respect that some people do ride road bikes still, or gravel. I would say gravel's almost in some ways replacing for a lot of people, at least on mass. Like so, you did a full gravel season, Unbound, Spring Classics. Something else, then it's the idea is usually between those seasons, because those seasons are there's a lot of variation here. If you're not taking it that seriously, you're not doing like massive builds, it's, just local racing. You don't necessarily have to do this, but it's good practice to take a break week sometime in August.
I do think having at least 2 weekends off between your quote seasons is like super helpful, even just from a life standpoint, like forgetting the training and like all that. Often there's a lot of stuff at home you got to get done. So I think usually if you have a couple weeks off, you can kind of tick off a lot of the like at home boxes.
And that's a good middle ground. Like, you know, I'm talking about a transition week where we would not do a lot of cycling. At least, you know, the 5 days during the week, we'd almost take off. Maybe you're like getting back into a bit of core strength. Again, not excessive. One set, just learning the routine. We might do that. We might go for a walk. You mentioned paddle boarding. Maybe you and your friends go and rent kayaks and go down a river or something. It's not that you can't be an active person and enjoy the summer. Like, in fact, I'm telling you to go and enjoy the summer.
Actually, exactly what you should do, yeah.
You know, go to a cottage instead of dock. And if you look at, you know, I'm thinking our top young athletes have, you know, because cottaging is big in Canada, or camping. Which,
again, I know I've said it on here before, but like I still do not understand it. Like,
I'm
all
what do they
about
call them?
it.
This is one of the questions I always ask people. So what do you call, you know, a cabin on a lake or a waterfront? And so there's like...
we just don't have it.
Well, there's like cabins, there's camps, there's cottages.
Yeah, we don't have.
There's also lake home. I think is one that I think that's like a very northeastern. Like we go to the lake home.
The lake house.
House. Oh, there's also house. It's not.
I've never heard someone say lake home.
Well, I guess it depends. How tight things are. I don't know.
The Jersey version is just down the shore. So that's
we're going to the shore.
That's all I have.
So where were we going with that? So you want to take some sort of break. And to Molly's point, for some people, that's probably good. You know, if you're not really charging that hard, you didn't do Unbound, you didn't do Gravel Worlds were just last weekend in this state. So these are not gravel, the UCI Gravel Worlds, and I keep ending up on the wrong website. This was the United States World Championships of Gravel. And so you'd maybe take that next week off before you start get into your cross stuff, or at least, as Molly says, that weekend, just don't add 2 more races, you know, as you're getting ready for cross necessarily. If nothing else, as I'm going to a cross practice immediately after this, it's just where are the tires? Oh my God.
Say, it's like, we're recording this at 8 a.m., but you've been up since like 6 trying to like swap all your stuff over.
And I'm organizing a practice, but it's also just, you know, okay, well, you have this bike. Maybe it's your gravel bike. Maybe it's a separate bike that you haven't touched. Maybe there's tires and they're flat, or you need to figure out how to order some tires from Belgium or something. There's just lots of stuff that goes into cyclocross. And then if you have 2 bikes, like it's doubled for those folks who are quite serious about it. So yeah, I think that's the idea, is that you spend a bit of that August, early September, depending on where you are. A lot of places don't have much cross racing in early September. You have a long weekend for most folks on the Labor Day, and then usually there's at least one more weekend that's nothing major. This year, I think Rochester's on the 22nd, which is the first North American like UCI race as far as I know.
Yeah, I think, you know, the northern states in Canada, definitely it's trickier because the cross season is so shortened because of winter weather. So definitely, like when I was down in New Jersey and like more in the New England and like mid-Atlantic states, like you really didn't start till like end of September, early October is when it kicked off. Yeah. But up here, it's definitely like you start feeling the cyclocross vibes by like mid-August.
And increasingly every year, it's like early in July this year, there was stuff starting. And I was amazed. I can remember, you know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago that it would be, you know, around Labor Day, people would be getting, you know, hey, can you do a cross session with this club, or, you know, can we book you for this day? And it's like in July now. It's pretty wild. It gets started, and there's people actually, you know, doing their park practices in August. I'm
excited about that because I think that means that cross might be coming back. I feel like cross had a super dip, like when gravel kind of got big, but I think it's coming back. You know, the number of people actually that talked to me this weekend about how excited they were about cross season because it's like more of a family-friendly affair.
Mm-hmm. No, there's a lot of arguments for it, for sure.
I think people are coming back around to it. They're realizing that gravel's great, it's fun, but cyclocross is actually like the perfect kind of bike racing, which is obviously something that most listeners know that I will stand by forever.
For sure. I mean, I think what a addition to, even maybe this is an idea for Dan for next year. We had a 4th race, and there's a cyclocross race as well.
That would be so fun. That would be a Friday night.
Yeah, there you go. Light it up.
Friday night under the lights, cyclocross.
And like pretty much every bike there could participate. Even the enduro people
could really
fun.
Really participate. Okay, Dan, if you're listening, we're doing this.
We can sponsor.
It's going to be the Consummate Athlete
We'll sponsor
Cyclocross.
the cyclocross.
I love it.
Yeah, so let's get into the recovery. So what we're talking about the year, and so what we're trying to caution you against is running from spring classics, maybe even Zwifting and fat biking before that, and then the season before that. Trying to run them all together. And there's certainly people that can get away with this for a period, but it is sort of thinking about, when we talk about a peak, you're thinking about mountains, right? Where it's like there's a peak of the mountain and then it comes down into a dip before you do the next mountain. And that's, your seasons look like that. If you have 2 or 3 peaks in the season, there'll be at least mini dips.
Otherwise, you take a frying pan to the whole curve and you just never go up.
Well, that's it. So they say that you can step off a peak or you can fall off of a peak, right? So the stepping off is you go to the cottage, you take 2 or 3 days off the bike, and then you ease back in. It's not that big a deal. But if you keep pushing, then you fall off the peak, and the falling off the peak would be injury, recovery, motivational issues, right? And these are the people, like, they sometimes just disappear, and it's not for an injury or an illness. It's like, oh, I just can't push the same way I used to. And it's like, well, it's not for lack of trying. It's that you were trying too hard.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so cyclocross, the reason we talk about recovery when we're talking about cyclocross is because unlike most races, cyclocross is tricky. It's back-to-back racing days. Typically, if you're racing cross, you're racing Saturday and Sunday. I'd say weekly cyclocross practices are way more common than like weekly mountain bike practices. Even, I guess, like weekly crits are pretty common, but like I'd say weekly cyclocross practices from like the number of people who do something like that is the highest. So you can very easily be basically racing 3 days a week for 3 months straight. Mm-hmm.
And so the other thing is, that lead in, again, the macro is that you're coming off of probably riding hard all summer. Whereas the summer disciplines at least have poorer weather, less racing in general. Again, some of the the indoor racing is changing this. Fat bikes are changing this. Historically, you would have some element of winter. Even in California, it's colder. It's a bit rainier. Right? Most places, it's not quite as good to be racing. Certainly, you could go to like a place like Tucson and hit, every group ride all week and race all winter. But for most folks, the summer months have already had some sort of forced break from racing, if not also intensity, and just the weather is less conducive. But cyclocross ends up you're jumping into group rides, it's hot, you're training a lot because you're maybe, summer or more daylight, all this stuff's happening. And then the nice thing about cyclocross is it keeps you moving in the fall when the weather's starting to get crummier and there's less daylight. So of course, go to cross practice or the weekly cross race. Like, you're working all day and then it's dark, and then these weird people are meeting in a park to go hard and practice skills for an hour. It's fantastic. We love cross for that. But it is that problem that we end up, what you'll often see. I had, the reason we're doing this is I have 3 calls, so I did 2 already this week, and then 1 more where it's essentially this question of, I'm getting, finding it harder to recover. It's like I'm trying to do this race and this race and this race series. There's the weekly one and then 2 on the weekend. Not always doubles, but maybe like this weekend has a cross race and then the next weekend has a cross race. Right. And so it's just a lot. And then maybe you're also trying to follow a training plan where there's 2 interval sessions during the week because the person who built the training plan maybe assumed you weren't doing a cross practice and you were going to train, 5 days a week. And maybe you're going to get two sessions in, and maybe they assumed you were 18 years old versus 60 years old. So there's a lot of factors there when we're talking about recovery and what the plan looks like if you are going to do these multiple races in a week, especially. Mm-hmm.
Okay, what's next?
So I think the heart then of this question is we want to train frequently, and that's what I seem to be reminding folks. And it gets to that weather and that work and that daylight is a lot of this, where I'll look at the plan and they'll get the weekly cyclocross practice, and then they'll get maybe either cyclocross pre-ride or openers on the Saturday, and then the cyclocross race on the Sunday. And if you're not a cyclocross racer, we should have said this off the bat, like this applies to fall mountain bike racing, fall mountain bike group rides.
Literally any kind of race.
You could have the same problem where, you're busy at work. Maybe you're a teacher, you're back at school, the daylight's really short. So on Wednesday you do cross practice, and then maybe you're doing like a trainer interval ride, and then on the weekend again, like a hard group ride or a race. And so it's just, everything's intense, but also your frequency has dropped. And one of the most important things we call frequency or consistency, they're sort of the same thing wrapped a little differently. where you still need to get those endurance and those unremarkable rides that aren't intense, those low intensity days. So the Tuesday and the Thursday might be low intensity, Monday and Friday might be more off, and then Wednesday could be cross practice or intervals. Saturday could be something like a pre-ride or openers, and then Sunday might be that race. So that would be, a nice situation. But what you'll see is those unremarkable workouts drop out, and then you actually start seeing the only workouts are intense workouts, and there's only 2 or 3 workouts or rides. We talked about the difference between workouts and rides. So just like rides, there's only 3 times on the bike in the week. So you just dropped your frequency from summer frequency, where maybe you were riding 6 or 7 times. Maybe you were even doing doubles or something in the summer when you had all this time and sunlight. Now you're dropped down to 3 sessions in a week. So you will see your performance decrease because you've dropped the frequency out. You're having too many rest days. Now you've dropped all the endurance out, which is the 80% that matters. And then you've sort of intensified the training where everything is hard. And so then you can start finding that the dose of the weekend race or the weekend long ride or the weekend marathon, whatever that weekend dose of intensity and training stress is, becomes very high relative to what your other rides are. You're a weekend warrior now, right? Where you're just smashing as hard as you can with the time you have on a Sunday. And then before you know it, it's Sunday again, and you just smash it again. And that starts getting, you'll get poorer and poorer performance again because the frequency, the consistency is low.
Right. Okay, so the obvious question then, like, what can someone do about that since, as you say, like, it's getting darker and they have less time? Like,
sure.
It makes sense that frequency consistency is going to drop in these months, but can we avoid it?
Sure. So, there's lots of ways to solve this. I think the most obvious would be that you have to train more consistently, so you need to keep with it. And so it might be some rides into dusk. You might have to use lights. You might have to ride the trainer. I'm always hesitant with that, but certainly the trainer starts to be a tool that we use when it is inclement, when it is too dark to be safe out, when you're time limited to get, and it could certainly be 30 or 45 minutes of, unremarkable, we could call it zone 2 or just like low intensity training.
That's what I was just going to say is, I talk to a lot of different coaches about this when I'm doing plans for bicycling and, writing up stuff for bicycling. And the one thing that they always say is like, and we said it on the last one about how to modify workouts, something is always going to be better than nothing. So that 30 minutes actually does make a difference. Like, it might not seem like it, like you say, unremarkable. You sort of get off the bike and you're like, you don't even really feel like you rode, but it actually is, moving stuff around and helping you actually recover and make those adaptations and everything that you need to be actually, racing well.
And the gut check there would be, are you someone that, is 45 minutes actually nothing to you, or is it actually over your average ride?
This is a good point.
Because if your frequency is only 3 workouts, say, in a week, it's just, you have 4 zeros in your average. So if we use the model, the idea of training stress score, the TSS, the performance manager, or what you might call fitness score in Training Peaks, the idea with that is just a 6-week rolling average of your average day expressed in load. And load is intensity times time. And so if you have 4 zeros every single week for 6 weeks, then you're going to have an average that gets pulled down. And I don't even have to see it, like, unless you're somehow slamming out 3 massive rides.
Which you shouldn't be.
Well, and again, that will start unraveling because, again, the frequency is lower. So those rides start becoming bigger and bigger doses, which means it's harder and harder to recover from them. So what you would then want to do is insert some of these rides. Your fitness score, your CTL, would be 30 to 45, likely at best. Again, most people's other rides aren't that big. So then it's like, well, a 45-minute ride at your zone 2 might be 30 or 40 TSS points if you just sat on the trainer for 45 minutes, right? And so that actually is maintaining or even increasing the average load, or what we might call your fitness score. Training Peaks calls it your fitness score. So if we believe in that model at all, then what you're trying to do is keep that average higher by not tossing a bunch of zeros into the average. Zeros are not great for averages, right? So even 10 minutes. Like, it just, if we're going to believe in that model, that would be the idea. And so whether you think about it as just like you're practicing your sport more often, or you think about it in terms of that training stress score, I think that's what it would suggest, right? Is trying to get that done for sure. And again, trying to have some of those days are low intensity days, like resisting the urge that, I only have 30 minutes, so I have to do 30 30s for 20 minutes or something to just maximize my training stress or something. That's not really the idea. It's more just mixing that in to let the body just be familiar with biking.
Love it. Okay, cyclocross weekends. Let's talk the more micro recovery Saturday to Sunday for masters who are busy, who have families that they're going home to. Thoughts on how to get through a race weekend?
So a lot of times with races, again, this is general, not everyone does this, but a lot of times 2 days out you would take off to sort of prepare your gear, get some recovery, make sure you're recovered from the intervals midweek. Because again, you might have ridden Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Friday, you take off to recover. A lot of people like to take Mondays and Fridays off, just the first day of the week and the last day of the work week, right? Spend time with their family, whatever they got going on. And then it depends. If it's a Saturday race, this would be slightly different. So let's start with the Sunday race. So then Saturday, you might do just a shorter, 45 minutes to 90 minutes ride we often do just 45-second openers. So just hard efforts, we do 3 to 5 by 45 seconds. Some people will do like a race pace, 3 to 5 minute type effort, something like that. And that those efforts could certainly be applied on the cyclocross course if you're fortunate to be able to pre-ride. A lot of cyclocross races, you're not going to drive to the course, but if they are local and they are available for pre-ride, and you could certainly use that as the pre-ride day where you warm up on the road, you do a couple laps just sussing out the lines, and then you use those same intervals I just described to see it parts of the course at speed. So you might use that 45-second through a section that's very hard, or the little climb on the course, or run-ups, right? It doesn't even have to be all on the bike, but just feeling those transitions at speed and those corners at speed. Because what often happens to people in cyclocross or any racing is stuff is a lot different when you're going twice as fast, right? Suddenly that gravel to pavement transition results in you being on your side. So you might pre-ride, but a lot of times for people that might be just at home on the trainer, quick in the morning before you take the kids to soccer or whatever you're taking them to. And it keeps the bike clean and the maintenance low on that Saturday. So again, you're more recovered, mentally ready. You haven't spent 6 hours at a cyclocross course in the sun. And then now you have to clean a bike, right? And it's, you've ruined your drivetrain and you're changing tires. So it's trying to minimize all that life stuff the day before so that you're there and sharp and ready to go. And then, of course, we should talk about fueling as well, but I'll just finish that off. That then on race day, you might warm up. And again, with cyclocross, there's some pre-riding that you can often do between races, assuming you're not, the immediate first race of the day. But in any case, we're making sure that we're, eating something before the ride. And then sort of usually most people are going to do something on the line as well to try and fuel that workout. So did you want to go to...
Well, I wanted to talk about the Saturday, Sunday races because cyclocross is typically 2 days, not one.
Yeah, so do you want to go through the different scenarios? So in the training plans we have, there's this gets laid out because everyone's cyclocross plan is different, every weekend's different. So I try and lay out the 4 scenarios. So no race weekend, Saturday race, Sunday race,
Saturday and Sunday
and then the double weekend, right? So does that make sense? There's four scenarios, and you just need to know how to deal with those. So I just spoke to the Sunday. So we went off day Friday, Saturday openers, Sunday race. So if we were doing Saturday race, we just back that all up a bit. So you'd take Thursday off, Friday openers, Saturday race. Sunday then and Monday become a bit skewed then. What we might try and do is, depending on the person, is actually fit in like an endurance ride of some type on Sunday because you're going to have the time. But you might also choose to take that off and then go Monday, would be more like a Tuesday in that case. And you'd have to just look at that next week to see how it flows from there.
And there are some masters who kind of need almost that 2 days off to recover, especially from cyclocross. Like, it's short, but it's so stinking hard. So, and
it's a long day.
That might be where that 30-minute spin comes in, right?
Sure, and that's knowing thyself. And this might be, again, it depends where in the season. If this is the first weekend, then maybe we can stack a bit of endurance in on the Sunday, take Monday rest, or, take rest on Sunday, train Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and that gives you a bit of skew space. Just being careful not to overdo it, right? But if this was in the middle of the season, this might actually be more where we actually do get 2 days of so maybe Sunday you do a recovery spin, like Molly said, grab a coffee, ride with someone who's a little slower than yourself, and then take Monday off, and then just get back into your typical week. And that might actually be a bit of a mid-season reset that's going to help with the recovery.
I'm just thinking about you meeting your, future wife for coffee. Although that was pre-race, I guess, now that I think about it.
Oh, yeah, because they race so late.
Yeah, this is why we love cyclocross season, folks.
I guess. Yeah, so that's that. So then that would be the Sunday race scenario. If it's a no race scenario, that one's also pretty straightforward. But again, you might take Friday as a rest day and then go Saturday hard, Sunday long would be how I would often do it. Whatever type of intervals you're working on, that's sort of the rough idea. I would say that like also with that weekend away, sometimes I'll actually take the intensity out of the weekend and actually do like a bit of an endurance block mid-season to say like, let's get the endurance back up and put in a bit of load. So it might be 2-3 hour rides or something like that. Again, it depends on the person and what they can handle. But that little endurance block mid-season or this time of year, late August before the season can be really nice rather than trying to just simulate another cyclocross race on that weekend, right? Like on Saturday, We're just going to drill 4 by 8 minutes, on our cyclocross bike. Sometimes it's actually nice to change the stimulus since you're already getting so much racing stimulus. Take that weekend off, take the structure and the intensity out of it and actually go Saturday, Sunday, even Friday. That's what I set up for the one client yesterday I was talking to. We planned out a little block at the end of September where he's going to miss the one race and do Friday, Saturday, Sunday, like train 2 hours after the Friday work day. Maybe 4 hours on Saturday and then 3 hours on the Sunday, something like that, right? And then we try and fuel that and everything else. So then the final example is the double. And I don't know that, as you said, the cyclocross isn't doing as well, I guess. So there's not as many doubles, I don't think, anymore that I'm seeing, at least when I'm building plans and coaching for folks.
It's a real shame.
It is and it isn't. I mean, it does give people a bit of their weekends back. But if in a double scenario, then so this means you're racing Saturday, Sunday. So what we would do is take Thursday rest. Probably you'd ideally get that midweek intensity to the Tuesday if you could, but it's not critical. But you just want to be careful that you're sort of getting, an easier day and a harder day midweek, getting a rest day to get recovered and the gear prepped. And then Friday openers, I'm usually less concerned about, again, because we're going to have that Saturday, Sunday big dose. So you could do that, but you could also do something where it's like an hour with just a couple shorter sprints in it. Maybe some spin ups, just nothing too stressful, but you're definitely on the bike so that it's familiar, your bike's working. And then Saturday, I would just make sure that I warm up well enough that I'm ready for the Saturday race. And then the Saturday race will serve as, a bit of a boost for the Sunday event for sure, right? Like it's going to be familiar. And then again, making sure that we eat before and we eat right after that Saturday race. And that's sometimes where you'll see people fall apart with those doubles, is that they're not doing enough fueling like immediately after and into the evening. And that could be because they're nauseous or for any variety of reasons, but trying to figure out ways that you can get food into you. So a lot of times it's the easy way out, but I'll have something like an Incher or a Boost handy. And if my gut's off, I can usually take that down. Or if I get talking to people or we're driving, we have to drive somewhere, just having some of these convenience foods and you can have your quinoa salad or whatever for in between, but it just might not, you might be driving a car, it might not be appetizing. So trying to have those options, recovery powders, whatever, that are going to help you start getting food in. It's not so much that it has to be immediately after, but the races are now like at least 24 hours apart, if not less, right? Because you've raced. So now it could be 23 hours if they were at the same time of day. So the clock is ticking. So the time does matter, but it is then making sure that you do eat. Like the problem is people, you end up just going to bed and then waking up. And then, you don't eat breakfast or something, and then it's, lunch. It's too close to the race to eat. So you could see how someone would get behind on the fueling just because of the race day.
For sure. And then our last topic before we wrap here is that fall is also when a lot of people finish their main season. They're going to continue racing cyclocross, but they also want to lose weight in this time. And I will say, like, the other nutrition topic to touch on is, like, it's fall. Cold and flu season is definitely here, I think we've talked to so many people who have colds right now. Just seems like stuff is starting to pick back up. So first and foremost, like making sure that, whether you're racing cyclocross or trying to lose weight or whatever you're doing, you're like making sure that you're, eating the very like antioxidant heavy diet, lots of bright colors on your plate. Obviously, we like AG1 to go with all of the healthy eating, but especially, honestly, AG1 travel packs for cyclocross season, like you cannot beat that for just having kind of all of your your micronutrients, your vitamins, your minerals, your probiotics, prebiotics, adaptogens, all the fun stuff in one packet.
Sure.
As usual, drinkag1.com/MollyH. But that has to be on top of taking care of your nutrition in a more holistic approach that is not like a do this and you'll never have to eat a vegetable ever again kind of thing.
Yeah, AG1, it is a great product with the, amount of training you're going to be putting in, and then also just when you're traveling and kids back to school and you're going back to work or these different things. So there is that. I think there's also the, wash your hands. At a lot of these races, there's not a lot of great places to wash your hands. So it might be something like a hand sanitizer or something just to try and keep those hands from going near your face, right? It's not everything that gets you sick, but it is a big part of like hand washing is a big deal. You can look it up. It's like pretty significant.
Turns out.
Right. So then there's cold and flu. So we're going to nutrition. So definitely some of these people who reach out, they're going to also see an RD or have been smart enough to talk to someone and just like have a look at their diet. And whether that is, as Molly says, the micronutrients, the protein, the veggies, whether that's a part of getting sick more often or not being able to recover. But I do think a lot of times what you'll see is that like weight loss piece will come in later in the call or the consult where it's like, also I'm trying to lose weight. And it's like, okay, so, and you're not recovering, you're saying. Oh, okay. All right. So this is where we can't sort of do it both ways, where it's like you want to intensify your training and you want to race faster than you've ever raced, but then also you're going to not put fuel in the car.
Yeah, and we are actually planning to have one of our favorite RDs back on soon, so we'll definitely also get them to get into this. But the long story short on that is just, it's nearly impossible to do both of those things at the same time. And generally speaking, we really do not recommend it for like many reasons.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's very complicated and very tied up. You have the psychology piece of all of this, but there's also that like metabolic engine type piece of it too, where if you just keep not putting fuel in the car, then the car keeps running colder and colder. If you will, the engine will get smaller and smaller. The burn rate gets smaller and smaller. The body may get more efficient in that it's cooling itself down and not putting out as much energy. And then the dilemma then is that like energy is watts, like watts are energy. So if you want more watts, right, there is this, the engine has to get bigger and bigger and burn hotter and hotter. So it is sort of like fueling. And so that's why I often emphasize that before and during fueling for the training, especially, less during for cyclocross, obviously, but, right up until and then immediately after, trying to fuel that work. So that the engine can run, right? There's fuel in the tank. And then it would be another argument, especially for masters, to do the 2 rest days in the week where we can have, more of that veggies and protein. Not that I'm not saying go low carb or anything weird like that. Just that there is time in the day. You're not trying to like get out for a ride. So you can have veggies with your every meal of the day. You can have veggies and protein, to try and keep that up and let the body recover and get the micronutrients in. So that then on Saturday you can fuel before the morning ride, get out and drink your sugar powder during the hard ride, recover afterwards. I sort of think that there's like that, again, if we only thought about it on the meal level, the plate, is popular. Like you show someone the plate and this is this much, it gets tricky. But then if you look over the course of the week, you have more places you can put these veggies and it makes more sense because you're not going out the door at 7 a.m. to ride a bike, right? And then right to work and these sort of things. So I do think that sometimes with the argument for at least the lighter day on the Friday and the 2 lighter days or off days in the week for sure. Mm-hmm. But that would be, again, if you're not recovering or you're getting sick frequently, these would be signs that like the dieting thing probably needs to go to the side for a while. and thinking like eating more, like bigger breakfast, more during the ride, rarely, not eating during a ride. And when I say eating, I mean fueling. So, sugar powder or whatever you want to eat, as long as you're eating. And then C, right? It's always that like, try it for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. And if everything goes sideways, you can always go back. But if you've been trying the 5-pound loss for a long time,
years,
try that, like try eating more all around, but especially before and during. And then also, like, if that's really challenging for you, like that is a great spot to work with a sports psychologist or an RD for sure.
Yes, and we have had a ton of them on the podcast, so definitely we'll throw a few of our favorite episodes into the show notes. All right, well, I think that wraps our recovery for cyclocross episode, but as we said, cross is coming, so if you have any more cyclocross questions, fall training questions, fall nutrition questions, definitely hit us up over on Instagram at Consummate Athlete or consummateathlete.com. We have a fancy contact form, makes it very easy to submit questions. We always appreciate them. And with that, thanks so much for tuning in and happy training. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.